Okay, well, here we are. And as Alex said earlier, I've been roaming around, I've been listening. I've been hearing many things with great curiosity and interest and amazement. I think that this room in itself is truly amazing because it is just so diverse. There's lived experience, consumers, researchers, service providers, government, union, employers, policy groups. It's just an amazing collection of ideas and knowledge and passion. So when I think about the conference and the full 2 days, I asked myself, what makes a successful 2 days gathering, conference? And in my mind, a successful always comes down to 3 things that have to happen. There has to be time for learning, there has to be time for work, and there has to be time for some fun. So I think, bravo, you have accomplished all 3. So the stage is set, and really feels like it's been set, wouldn't you think, in terms of just starting with the comments from the Honourable Minister Quattro and what she's accomplished in 4 years with the people around her, and to quote herself, that she has an unwavering commitment to human rights for persons with disabilities. So we have just such a wonderful opportunity with her at the helm. And I know people in the room share that kind of feeling. And also in terms of between she and Deputy Minister LaRoche, how they have kind of set the theme and the determination to get as much done with the time that they have. So again, it feels like the stage is set, the time is now. One thing that really struck me in the first little bit, I guess, is how much our language has changed. When you think about the new Accessibility Act, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, our human rights language has now made it into legislation. We've changed how we talk about what we're trying to get done. You always hear it now framed in a context of access to opportunities and services on equal par with other people. People with and without disabilities, no difference. So it's a huge shift that has happened and people have been trying to make this happen for, I don't know, maybe 30 years. But I think it's the last 2 years that we've really come of age with it. So the stars are aligning, aren't they? We've got the Accessible Canada Act, a systemic mechanism to address barriers before discrimination. When barriers are there, to remove them, to prevent them. The Act's going to enable standards. They're going to be regulated, they're required, they're mandatory. And the new government organization mandated to develop these standards, the Canadian Accessibility Standards Development Organization, sorry. I'll be in trouble for that, but there's too many people in the room. I know it's going to get back there. Anyway, they're mandated as well to start with employment. So hey, how could it get any better? The other thing I've been kind of taken with is just the level of energy in the large room and in the breakout rooms. And the table talk kind of mirrored the panel presentations that were going on, because a lot of it was about learning from people at a panel, but the talk that was happening at the tables was also sharing information, sharing knowledge, and sharing ideas, and just, things about best practices, and hearing new information like, $338 billion, 17% of GDP is what it's worth to have a full inclusion in a workplace. Sharing best practices. We heard about a practice in Finland in terms of children in school and getting early work mentoring. There was sharing of new initiatives from the Canadian Disability Survey about hub initiatives, the Innovation Lab, Standard on Disability Management System. We also spent time naming and grappling with challenges. The challenges of the whole changing nature of work. Being in a gig economy, I still don't know what that means really, but I know it's a challenge. And also the challenge of precarious nature of work these days. Many people in contracts and just going contract to contract. And also exchanging ideas about, how do we engage employers? How do we develop new partnership value matrix? How can we research that's truly action participatory? brainstorming ideas about having a new social enterprise where people with disabilities play a key role in organizing this kind of a forum, maybe organizing the next forum and going on to sell that service. We had a lot of quotes too, so I got to throw some out before I go into what's next. You heard the quote, "Change happens at the speed of trust." I'm keeping that one. "Make it real, make it easy. Don't start from scratch." Bring a shared understanding of lived experience to every single part of every single process. Vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creation, and change. And disability confidence is when organizations stop seeing something as a problem, but as a workplace factor, just part of everyday work. The themes that were clearly visible throughout the 2 days was nothing about us without us, or as Deputy Minister LaRoche said, nothing about us, nothing without us, period. Nothing without us, period. And it is becoming a requirement to engage lived experience and consumers in all phases of an initiative. For example, with CASDO, legislation, it's in legislation, it has to be, the board has to be a majority of persons with disabilities. Right now it's 80%. So it is something that can also be built into standards. It's new. But it's certainly, I believe, it's the road we're going down, and it's what was said amongst delegates and panel members throughout the full days, that it has to be full engagement of lived experience and consumers at every phase of every initiative. But it's also paramount that we think about and we recognize that every new initiative also draws down on capacity of people to be able to be engaged. The capacity of organizations, of consumers and lived experience to be part of the process. So also built into our initiatives, all our actions and commitments, it's going to be very important that we start to replenish that capacity and that we enhance the capacity rather than draw down on it. Partnerships was another big one. How crucial it is to work with other organizations and governments so that there's a similar experience of equity. The idea around partnerships being one where you can say no, that partnerships are risky sometimes. Partnerships do take some compromise, but there's also areas that we're not willing to compromise on, so what happens then? How do we bring partners to the table when they're not at the table now? And I guess one of those that's been fairly clear is that of large business employers, notwithstanding Air Canada and Marie-France. Thank you so much for being here. But we need more. We need to go to bring in other employers and other voices that often don't arrive at these kinds of tables. Voices that reflect intersectionality, that reflect other minorities, that recognize folks with disabilities, have all sorts of lived experience. So when we look at the strategy itself, I think that's one of the most promising practices of partnership and something that we can be very, very proud of in terms of our small group of 5 organizations, 5 people with supports who really led the last 3 years of developing this strategy. Without ownership. I think that's the most unique thing in the world, that this strategy was developed with hundreds and hundreds of people across the country, with focus groups and workshops and 3 years of annual conferencing and roundtables with provinces and territories. I mean, who can get a province and territory in the same room with the federal government? I mean, it's just really quite remarkable. And did that without taking ownership. And I've always said, it's not our strategy, it's your strategy. It's all of our strategy. And that strategy, despite being so complex and so many layers, so many players, it has 2 pillars, just 2 pillars. Sure, we can do that. I think that the pillars, too, have to be of equal weight. And it's easy to get caught in one pillar and forget about the other one, and the place will collapse. So the pillar of the workplace, a disability confident and inclusive workplace, is as important, just as important, the same importance as the pillar of supports, a comprehensive support system for folks with disabilities. We can't have one without the other. You'll remember the diagram that went up, and it's really good. I found it super because it's just so clear that those two pillars on either side, in the middle were folks with disabilities. Underneath were the partnerships that were holding it all together. And overarching, you know, like the sun, the rainbow, all those wonderful things, were the values, the core principles, what keeps us together and keeps us grounded. Am I done? Oh, you're putting it up. Okay, thank you. So the strategy will take on a life of its own, because as the group of 5 don't own it, we don't own it. Collectively, in this room, we don't own it. The country owns it. But we're responsible by being here through our passion, through our commitments, of taking this strategy and ensuring that everybody across the country, throughout the country, feels part of this strategy, can be equally proud of the strategy, equally excited with it, able to say, yeah, I see myself right there, and that's a little piece I'm going to do. Actions will be happening on this strategy on their own, in rooms other than this room, in tables that you're going to be going to, by people you know and people you don't know. So where this strategy goes from here is really quite exciting, and its next kind of steps that are involved. So we have some opportunities for this, and I'll just recap very quickly. It's the standards that are coming out through the Accessible Canada Act. We have opportunities through the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, because there's a new reporting mechanism, and that can be used to bring the discussion and the challenges in terms of what government is not doing to different levels. And we have a new monitoring process with the Canadian Human Rights Commission around that convention. All those 3 can be used to move the strategy forward. We have some challenges. And the challenges are, and I think we're committed to addressing the challenges, is to ensure that there's lived experience consumers at every process. To work hard on bringing a hub about. The hub has come up over and over, and again, I think a hub is a network of hubs. It's not a hub that somebody's going to own, but it's a way of sharing information through a network of hubs so that people can go to one place and receive information about accommodations, receive information about how to be a disability-confident workplace, receive information about how you can get engaged with the strategy, etc. We need large business in the room. We need cross-sectors with the provincial and municipal governments and territorial governments. So kind of as final words, I think, again, I'd say strategy belongs to everyone, to all of us. No one owns it. We need to use it to inform other initiatives. We're charged here to go forth and build momentum. What we do as individuals or organizations to advance this strategy is really up to ourselves. How we take it back to our workplace, our colleagues, our supervisors, our communities. There's been many commitments already made and shared. And some of those actions and other ones could be about building out different alliances and allies, looking at our own structures and saying, yeah, do I fit this strategy? Taking it to a boss, said, hey boss, do you fit this strategy? Bringing resources that can go into a hub or a network of hubs. Some of the discussions, too, have already started and set dates. There's some people leaving this room saying, okay, we're going to have a consultation in the spring. We'll get together in January. We've already made some dates and plans, and I think that that's really exciting. So what happens next really is something that Alex is going to share with you, but I do understand that the Committee of 5 have committed to stay engaged and help us through the next process and facilitate or coordinate, kind of find a way to bring people back together who want to be still engaged. And I won't say too much. Maybe I'll say a whole bunch more about that without knowing anything, but I can see, they're looking really worried down there, aren't they? So I'll pass it back to Alex. But I have to congratulate everybody in the room.
Thank you, Mary. I think you can see why we asked Mary to carry out this role. It's really important to have somebody who's looking a little bit overview of the whole thing and is not as involved as most of the rest of us have been. So thank you very much. So much to think about. So where does it go from here? We're at a point where I think, as Mary sketched out, tremendous opportunities are opening up. The form within which we work is going to shift over the next year or two. CASDO's ramping up. On provincial levels, various things are happening. There probably will be some, who knows, federal-provincial collaboration if things work really, really well. And all of that means that anything we do coming out of this has to be flexible, it has to be nimble, it has to be responsive to what's happening. These are just general comments. We do not have a huge pool of resources to support this at this point in time. We're going to do our level best to facilitate all the connections that have started today. The main vehicle we're going to use is a conference report. The conference report will be our best attempt to weave all this together. I would hope it would honor Mary's input and certainly use that as a big part of the framework, but essentially a way for all of you to, who've each been part of a chunk of this or some chunks of this, to see it as a whole, to understand the other initiatives that are taking off, perhaps who's meeting with whom, who you might connect up with, what's the most promising initiative that you might have the biggest stake in that maybe you could tell other people about, that kind of thing. So the conference report will be issued in the new year. It'll be as good as we can make it, as comprehensive and useful and action-oriented. I think a commitment can be made. We'll have a conference next year. We have a significant stream of funding to make it happen. So that's really, really good news. And that's the minimum of what will occur. And of course, there'll be a report back at that time. What fills in the next year and what form things take? Mary had a really good observation. There isn't just one hub. There are probably going to be several. They won't be owned by any one organization probably. They'll be distributed. We're going to be finding some new ways and hopefully some new resources to keep people together, to build the strength and momentum of what we're doing. That's going to take a lot of us figuring out and using opportunities as they arise. But let's use this window. Let's stick with the energy and momentum we have today. Let's all get home safe. And let's take a day off tomorrow if at all possible. And then next week, think about the best, strongest thing you got engaged with today and yesterday, people you met, people you'd like to work with. If you haven't quite managed to make that connection, bring it home a little bit more. If you've made the connection, get moving, but think of other people you can involve. We're the ones who are going to create this, all of us together. So let's go, let's do it. And before everyone leaves, Steve's coming up to thank some people without whom the last 2 days couldn't possibly have happened. We're not going to be able to name names of every single person, but we'll do our best because there's a lot in behind this, a lot of volunteer work and a lot of infrastructural work. And I also personally want to thank the AV folks who make all the magic possible here. Thank you.